Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to Learn with Lorna 136, where we'll be looking at the Caithness Home Guard collection. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. The Highland Archive Service has 4 archive centres across the north of Scotland in Inverness, Portree, Fort William and Wick. This series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland. There's no payment or subscription required to watch the Learn with Lorna series, but if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're very grateful for that. And I know I say it every week, but I do mean it every week. So thank you to those of you who have done so. This week, I'm back live. I hope you managed to catch last week's. I know it's a little bit harder to find when it's not live. But I also know the sound quality is better when it's not streaming live, so I hope you're able to find it, and if not, you can watch all previous episodes on the High Life Highland YouTube channel. This week we are looking at a collection held at Nucleus, the Nuclear and Caithness archives. You might have seen that our theme for February across our social media pages has been the theme of love, whether that's love in the collections or things we love about our jobs or things, particular collections we love. And so this week I'm looking at the Caithness Home Guard collection, which is a collection particularly loved by archive assistant in Nucleus, Anne. And this is the records of the Caithness Home Guard, which is the collection CP567. And I must, before I go any further at all, also give my thanks to Daniel. Now, Daniel is one of the volunteers at Nucleus who has catalogued this collection and also loves it, and I'll be interspersing some things that Daniel wanted pointed out as I go forward. So thank you to Daniel and to all our volunteers. Over the years there have been various bodies who have been known across different countries as the Home Guard. But I'll be looking at what's probably the best known, certainly from a British perspective is the best known, which is the British Home Guard of World War II. So let's start a little bit with a little bit of background from a UK-wide point of view about what the Home Guard was for. On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. I've done previous episodes on World War II, so I'm not going to go into that in any great detail. But within 2 days, France and Britain responded by declaring war on Germany. And these events were the culmination of rising tensions, political insecurity, economic insecurity that had been hanging over Europe since the end of World War I. And so that was kind of the long-term picture that World War II was kind of building. There was discomfort building. But also it followed Hitler's remilitarization of Germany, and also a desire to claim land for Germany. And as I say, I'm not going to go into detail about the war, but please do go back and have a look at those episodes. So I'm going to go ahead instead from that September 1939 outbreak of the war, go ahead 8 months to May 1940, by which point the invasions by the Nazi armies had spread to other countries. So by this point, countries including Norway and Denmark and Belgium and the Netherlands and the Baltic states had been encroached upon. And also hundreds of ships had been sunk by Nazi U-boats. So the war by now was in full kind of horrendous swing. And the evacuation of British troops from Dunkirk was also just around the corner. So that's kind of where we are in a war context. And fears were rising in Britain about the possibility of a German invasion here. And our kind of famous feeling that is certainly famous within a British psyche, that our coastline protects us, that our isolation is a great thing, we're separate from other people, this, historically had been a very good thing. By this point, that's starting to feel a little bit shaky, because what it really meant at this point of naval warfare and aerial warfare was that we had about 11,000 miles of coastline where Nazi troops could land. Now, of course, as soon as the war broke out, hundreds of thousands of men went off to fight, and I'm sure we all will have relatives. Certainly both of my granddads served. One served in India and the other in the very heavily bombarded island of Malta. So a large proportion of the men will have gone to fight. But what about the people who were too old or too young, or were in reserved occupations. And the reserved occupations were those that were seen to be of enough significance that they needed to stay at home. So these were people like teachers or doctors, farmers, miners, railway workers, people who would keep Britain running and keep the war effort running. The Home Guard was established to make use of these people, to make use of their skills and their abilities, and to create a secondary line of defence on the home front if the invasion should come. And if you're picturing the Dad's Army cast, certainly many people in Britain might be, in a sense you're right, because it's a disparate age, a disparate group of people. But this was a job that was given seriously and a job that was taken seriously. There was a real serious possibility that Britain would be invaded, and if that had happened, these men who made the Home Guard, and there were some women as well, but it's predominantly men, they would suddenly have become frontline troops. And they were trained and organised in that context, with that in mind, that if there was an invasion, they would become frontline. The Home Guard was established in May 1940, initially under the name the Local Defence Volunteers, and it was Churchill who changed that name to the Home Guard in August 1940. And I wanted to share these notes with you that the team up in Nucleus sent to me. On the 14th of May 1940, Anthony Eden, Secretary of State for War at the time, made a speech broadcast on the Home Service News Bulletin at 9 p.m. to ask men to volunteer for a home defence force, initially to deal with German invasion by parachutists, as had happened in Denmark and Norway. And this is what he said. Now a word to those who propose to volunteer. When on duty, you will form part of the armed forces, and your period of service will be for the duration of the war. You will not be paid, but you will receive uniform and you will be armed. You will be entrusted with certain vital duties for which reasonable fitness and a knowledge of firearms are necessary. These duties will not require you to live away from your homes. In order to volunteer, what you have to do is give your name at your local police station, and then, as and when we want you, we will let you know. And the response was overwhelming. And if you think about the level of people who went to serve in the forces immediately when war broke out, the same feeling was there in the people who couldn't go to fight. About 250,000 men and some women served with the Home Guard in Scotland during the 4.5 years it operated. And this is again from the Nucleus notes. Initially there were no ranks. Section or platoon leaders were appointed, but it was purely a volunteer force based on equality of service. The organisation became more militarised after November 1940, when commissions, ranks and saluting were introduced. It evolved from a way of involving those who were perhaps too old to serve but wanted to play a part, to a credible second line of defence. Since 1939, the government had been overwhelmed with offers of help from men who couldn't serve for whatever reason but wanted to contribute in some way. Those between the age of 17 and 65 could volunteer in the LDV. At a Scottish level, there would be a General Staff Officer Grade 2 equal to Major. At area HQs, so for instance in Glasgow, Highland, Edinburgh, there would be a GSO, I'm not entirely sure how you say that, 111, GSO 3, which was a captain's rank. And each area headquarters also had an unpaid area organiser. So you can see that it moved from that kind of poorly equipped, a basic sort of rudimentary militia force, but with civilians being rallied to support the main troops. And that moved to become, and as the war progressed, it moved to become much more of a well-equipped, well-trained force of around 1.7 million, which is really, really substantial. Now Daniel, the volunteer at Nucleus who I mentioned, was keen that I should point out, and therefore I will, that this was a professionally run body of men. So this was not the image we maybe have of the kind of Dad's Army bumbling silly mistakes all the time. This was a professionally run body of men who played a really significant role in Britain's World War II story. They were trained to repel enemy invasion, trained in bomb disposal, in manning anti-aircraft guns and coastal artillery, They were trained to guard munitions factories, communications networks, and aerodromes. They were trained to capture enemy airmen who would be shot down over Britain. They were trained to manufacture petrol bombs, Molotov cocktails, and to remove the signposts, install roadblocks, all of these things that would delay an invasion or hamper an invasion, but also things that would mean that the forces, the official armed forces, could be released to do other things. And I think it's really important here to reiterate the fact that all of this was done in an unpaid volunteering capacity while carrying on with their regular work, which you'll remember, for those who were working, those jobs were the vital reserved occupations. So they're already doing a huge amount for the war effort, and then they're joining the Home Guard as a voluntary role. So that's the kind of national perspective, but how did it play out in Caithness, and what does this collection tell us about that? Like everywhere else, Caithness men flocked to join this new force. And we've got some records in the collection that detail how many people joined in each area and where they drilled, so in schools and church halls and so on. And Caithness faced similar challenges to the other Home Guards, so for instance, initial lack of equipment and so on. But also, the Caithness Home Guard had the additional challenge of a large geographical area and the issue of the Highland weather, which could be problematic. Captain Ian McHardy, who became Lieutenant Colonel Ian McHardy, Lieutenant I think is, get the right pronunciation, was appointed to command the Caithness Division, which he did from 1940 to 1943. And his name appears throughout this collection. I've spoken so many times in the course of Learn with Lorna about the type of people who kind of keep things running. I've spoken about it in the football episode, in wartime episodes, all sorts of different ones. And there are still, I know people still like this who turn their hand to supporting everything. And Ian McHardy, as well as being in charge of the entire Caithness Division of the Home Guard, was County Director of Education, Commissioner for the Boy Scouts, and a bank manager. When the number of volunteers reached 1,500, they became known as the first Caithness Division, the first Caithness Battalion of the Home Guard. And they immediately set about preparing for a potential invasion. And the collection contains numerous memos describing what they did. So things like this. Arrangements are being made to have all signposts, names of villages, railway stations, etc. taken down and removed. In order to ensure that mobile columns detailed with the relief of aerodromes, etc. are fully conversant with their routes both by day and by night, practice marches will be undertaken in order to familiarise all ranks with the country in which they are likely to operate. So not only are they going around taking down those signposts, so if the Nazi army lands they are disorientated, but also they're dealing with the fact that they might need to be mobile, and therefore they're practicing day and through the night of where they would need to go, who would take the lead, where each group of people would go. So, and as I say, doing that while continuing with their own work as well. Full-scale military exercises were undertaken to ready people across the country for an invasion. So every Home Guard that existed would do full-scale invasion exercises so that not only the Home Guard, but all the other local organisations and the general population would know what to do in the event of an invasion. And in these military exercises, umpires had the job of creating an accurate and realistic scenario for all the people taking part. And the documents in this collection show the immense scale of this. So for instance, the umpires are planning this event, or the event is being planned, and then all the local organisations are being formed. So for instance, there's a memo that copies in the police, the Home Guard, the doctors, the fire service, the food officers, the WVS, the gas and electricity and water suppliers, the mortuary service, the postmasters, the salvage officers. Everybody is involved in knowing what their part would be in the event of an invasion. So here are some instructions for just one such practice exercise. This one is what to do in the event of an unexploded mine Circulars will be delivered by the wardens to a large number of households, asking families to turn out of their houses when warned of an unexploded mine in the vicinity, and to go to, and also will be given to the post office. It then says that the families who have evacuated their houses will be given tea and will be issued with clothes, etc. if required. Provision will be made to transport the aged and infirm. The actual names of some of those people will be linked up with the names given to the soldier relatives mentioned above. A large number of sewers, water, gas mains and electricity cables, as well as blocked roads, will be set up as staged, so that it will be necessary to call an immediate conference to decide the degree of priority to be given to all these different incidents. The unexploded mines in different parts of town will necessitate the calling of the RAF, the BD squad, and a number of badly damaged houses will entail assistance from the Home Guard for sentry duties. So they're saying we'll practice what would happen in the event of unexploded mine, and that practice will include blocking sewers, water and gas mains, taking down electricity cables, blocking roads. So you get the sense of how seriously they are taking this. It goes on to say that they're finding it difficult to find old buildings to practice for rescue incidents, but they're going to try everything they can to find places. If suitable premises can be found, the RAF will be requested to duplicate their show at the last exercise, when a £20 bomb and 12 pounds of gun cotton resulted in a perfect rescue party item. It goes on to say that they'll make a small use of a small quantity of persistent tear gas to show people what that would be like. Due public notice will be given, and the portable public address system will visit various incidents where it will be necessary to broadcast information to the public. So that was kind of a dress rehearsal for an unexploded mine, but there are others that detail a whole scenario in which enemy aircraft or ships landed at Melvich or Ray, or detailing what role every single person would play. So this is an extract from the kind of script, if you will, for an exercise. At Upper Leibster, represented by one company of 7 Camerons, representing 3 enemy infantry companies with normal infantry weapons, arrive at 2200 hours. By 23:15 hours, they have to be at the north of Camster Lodge at point 378. Object, to attack Skitton via Wotton. Must go fast and stay on road. Can be dispersed if 2 companies of 12 Cameronians are turned against them. Can very easily be dispersed if carriers are used as well as infantry. At Ray, theoretical strength of 1 battalion less 1 company, represented by 2 companies of Camerons, have got to be in position by 0001 hours and move by road, South Road, to arrive there by 0230 hours. Object, to move south of Thurso onto Castleton. So you really start to see who's playing what role, what positions people are given, the timing that they are expected to keep to, and what would happen then was the umpires would follow this happening, these practices, and would record notes. So they would record notes about the exercise, any errors, any places for improvement, something that couldn't be envisaged until they ran it through and they saw the problem arise. And in one respect, that all sounds really fun. You know, that sounds everybody's dressing up and they're walking about in the night and they're playing certain roles. But I think if you imagine how completely terrifying it would be to do all of this with the reality hanging over you. You're only doing it because you might really need to do it shortly. And that's really quite frightening. And I think if you remember, and I know some of you certainly will remember, that by July 1940, Wick had already been bombed. The Bank Row bombing had happened. Children had been lost. And so the war was already very close and very real for the people of Caithness. Have a listen to this extract from Brian D. Osborne's book, The People's Army, the Home Guard in Scotland. With the benefit of hindsight, a successful German invasion in the autumn of 1940 seems improbable, but it cannot be overemphasised that in 1940 matters had a very different complexion. The chiefs of staff were receiving alarming news about German preparations, a concentration of transport ships in the Low Countries in France, a build-up of bombers and fighter bombers in airfields along the Channel coast. These indications, together with favourable moon and tide states, led the Chief of Staff on the evening of Saturday the 7th of September to issue the code word Cromwell, the warning of imminent invasion. This called the Home Forces, including the Home Guard, to a state of immediate readiness. In the Highlands, the 1st Rothshire Battalion, whose area stretched from sea to sea and across the Minch to Lewis, got the message and had it circulated to all posts within half an hour. Within 2 hours, all posts were manned. The stand-down order was received at midday on Sunday the 8th. And that really gives you a feeling of, the fear and the fact that this was not a theoretical thing. This is, they're watching the tides, they're watching the days that were potential for the Nazi army to land, and within half an hour they've dispersed that message, and within 2 hours everybody is at their posts in case they need to be. And yes, Linda, absolutely, all of that with no mobile phones, with no computers, they're dealing with the technology they had available to them. So this collection, as you can already see, contains great detail about the work and the preparations done by the Home Guard. There are papers and memos that really, really detail the construction and use of Molotov cocktails and where to store them, how to construct roadblocks. So it's not just, we might all think, oh, we could probably throw some stuff over a road to close it, but there's detailed instructions of what to do, where to get it, how to place it, how to use automatic rifles, how to undertake first field dressing and first aid, how to use hand grenades. And these are men who, of course, many of them will have seen the First World War and have had some experience, but some of them are, farmers or railway workers who are suddenly having to learn how to use hand grenades. And I mentioned there that hand grenades and so on were supplied, and in fact in this collection the supplies are well detailed. So we can see, for instance, that in August 1940 the Scottish Command noted that 880,000 caps were issued to the Home Guard, 1,000 steel caps per week to each command, haversacks, waist belts and armbands and boots being distributed alongside weapons and ammunition where they were available. And of course the Home Guard would have come as a secondary line of defence, so the official forces would take precedence. I mentioned right at the beginning that one of the roles given to the Home Guard was to capture any German parachutists that landed, and there are some brilliant details about this in the collection. And again, things that sound funny, and Dad's Army has a lot to answer for in this, that we hear a lot of these things and they seem funny. TV and film have had a lot to do with that, until you put them into the context of a war and the fact that it might happen. So here's an extract from a memo entitled Tactics of German Parachutists. The following information has now been received from the Dutch officials now in this country who were in the Hague area during the last few days. German parachutists who landed in Holland used the following disguises. So the people from the Netherlands are telling the British authorities, this is our experience of German parachutists, this is what you need to look for. The German parachutists, when they were captured in the Netherlands, had been wearing the following disguises: Dutch, French and British military uniforms, Dutch military police uniform, Dutch county police and municipal police uniforms. Others were dressed as civilians, priests, peasants, schoolboys. Some were only 15, 16 and 17 years old, dressed as Dutch schoolboys. Young boys dressed as girls were dropped, girls dressed as nurses, wearing the uniforms of the hospitals near which they landed. Servant girls were landed in areas where they had previously worked as domestic servants. Those dressed as girls, i.e. both men and women, carried baskets full of hand grenades made to look like provisions, in addition to automatics hidden under their clothing. Some carried poisoned cigarettes and chocolates. It appeared that many of the parachutists had extremely heavy equipment, which, if it did not break their legs on arrival, considerably hampered their movements. And it goes on to give an insight into those parachutists, some of whom, as you heard there, were 15, 16 and 17. And they described the fact that many of them were unscrupulous, were really keen to be in the Nazi parachute regiments. But it goes on to say that some who they've captured appear to be dazed and confused and ill-trained and hungry, and they don't know where they are and they don't know why they're there. And that, I think, is a very telling little entry to say about your enemy, that you can see that there are people there who probably haven't chosen to be there or are not entirely sure what they're doing. It goes on to say, information has been received that should the country be invaded, Germans will be landed in British battle dress, probably mainly by air and possibly also by sea. They may be in possession of the AB-64 and other identity certificates, and they will attempt to enter vital areas and vulnerable points. It's probable that they will also endeavour to pass through roadblocks, which they will then attack in the rear. So, talking about how they're going to come, it goes on to say, cases were known in the invasion of Holland where parties of Germans dressed in Dutch uniform fell in behind marching Dutch columns. The leaders of enemy parties and some others amongst them are likely to speak perfect English. So how are they dealing with that? If someone comes in perfect British battle dress, speaking English, walking behind part of a body of men, what are they going to do? Well, this says, as a method of testing suspects, attention is called to this headquarters intelligence summary, dated the 22nd of July 1940. And it gives a list of words which are difficult for German-speaking peoples to pronounce, including North Sea, soothe, clothes, wrong, wretch, those, rats. And then it goes on to say that listed below are approximate pronunciations of how people who speak German might pronounce those words. So they might say Nordsee, they might say suit instead of soothe, they might say rats instead of rats. They might say wrong with a G on the end. That was a terrible German accent. I'm better with rats. So it says, a short sentence containing one or more of these words should be written on a piece of paper and the suspect instructed to read it out. So it's quite extraordinary to think that's the level of your defence, that you're saying to people, read this list of words and we'll see if you sound German. So you can imagine how confidential that list would have been at the time, but how quickly the word could have got back. And words were important internally as well. So the collection at Nucleus contains pages of code words used by the Home Guard. So for instance, if they said blackbird something, it would mean I've sighted enemy aircraft, I've sighted enemy ships at. So it might say, Blackbird Wick. Apples would mean I have sighted enemy aircraft. So the first one was ships, second one is aircraft. Action stations, of course, one we still know, immediate threat of invasion. There are also other code words used, including Cinderella, Bovril, Harlequin, Blood Red, Banquet Light, Ambrose. And you can see that was tested in a brilliant document that we hold, which is a questionnaire used to train Home Guard members. And the document is entitled, What Every Home Guardsman Should Know. And the questions in this include testing knowledge of those code words, testing knowledge of all the phone numbers you might have needed, map reading skills, how to tell the difference between enemy and friendly parachutists, what to take in the event of action stations being called, how to challenge people to find out which side they're on. And of course, despite this, because I'm aware that we do have a kind of real soft affection in this country for the Home Guard, and so I wanted to share it with you. Having said that there weren't a huge number of those kind of Dad's Army silly mistakes, I wanted to share one with you because sometimes training did go wrong. And this is a letter sent to the Home Office in 1943 from the island of Stroma in the Pentland Firth, just to the north of the Caithness mainland. Dear Mr. Southam, I would like to draw your attention to an incident which some of us heard and observed here on last Wednesday night and Thursday morning. About 9:20 p.m, a couple of rifle shots were here, coming from the direction of John O'Groats, and again about 00:10 hours on Thursday morning, at the change of the watch, we heard several magazines being fired, some of common ammunition, others were tracers, which gave us the clue of where they were coming from. On making investigation, I hear that the Home Guard were out in that district that night. Some people here that were walking home that night heard the ping of the bullets whizzing through the air past them and the thud of where the bullets fell. In fact, they were uncomfortably near. Whoever is responsible for actions like this should have his rifle taken away from him, whether it be the Home Guard or the Coast Guard. They have most likely got hold of some tracer ammunition from the wrecks of the Ness of Duncansby. I was to have got on to Mr. Mackenzie, John O'Groat Hotel, who is the CEO of this district, about it, but I'll leave it to you to inquire. We certainly do not want this to happen again. Sorry to trouble you. Which I just think illustrates that sometimes these things do happen, and you can picture them firing off the coast towards Stroma, and the people in Stroma just being like, what the heck just happened? Was that a bullet? That letter was from 1943, and it's in that year that our collection ends. Ian McHardy had to stand down because he didn't have time to command the Home Guard as well as doing all the other things he was doing. So as the collection came via his part in it, that's where the collection ends. The Home Guard as a whole was stood down in December 1944 and then disbanded the following year. The feared invasion had never come, but the Home Guard had still served an absolutely vital role in Caithness and across the country. And across the UK, 1,206 Home Guard members had been killed and 557 had been wounded. Their role in preparing the nation, in supporting the forces, in capturing enemy aircraft, and in carrying out duties like anti-aircraft defence that freed up the main official forces to go, was absolutely vital to Britain's war effort. In 1941, only a year after they had been set up, the value of the Home Guard was already being recognised, and this was a message sent by King George VI. I heartily congratulate the Home Guard on the progress made by all ranks since it was established a year ago today. On many occasions I have seen for myself the keenness with which they are fitting themselves for the discharge of vital duties in the defence of our homes. They have already earned the gratitude of their fellow citizens for the prompt and unstinted assistance which they are constantly giving to the civil defence services. The Home Guard stands in the direct line of various bodies of militia, trained bands, fencibles and volunteers, the records of whose fine spirit and military aptitude adorn many a page of our history. I thank them for the service which they freely give at considerable sacrifice to their leisure and convenience, and I am confident that in cooperation with their comrades in arms of the Field Army, they will fit themselves to meet and overcome every emergency, and so make their contribution to the victory which will reward all of our united efforts. George VI. And of course, that victory did come. I hope that's been interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it. It is a really fascinating collection. I see that you're saying there, Anne, that you want to read them. Please come up to Nucleus and have a look at them. We'd be delighted to show them to you. And that's the case with all the subjects I talk about in Learn with Lorna. The collections I talk about are held in our offices for you to come and look at and read and investigate, so please do so. I hope you can join me next week. I'll be looking at the story of Dr. Grigor, who is known as the father of Nairn, and I'm looking forward to that because I'm conscious I don't talk about Nairn that much, so looking forward to doing that one. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're really grateful for that. Thank you very much. See you next week.